There's not much to see really in the tiny village of Szymbark, Poland, but there's one attraction that continues to draw large numbers of tourists. It's the upside-down house built by Polish businessman and philanthropist Daniel Czapewski. Completed in 2007, Czapewski designed his upside-down house to celebrate the end of the communist era in Poland. Visitors enter the upside-down house via a roof window from where they can walk around on the ceilings. Internally, the house is furnished as it would have been during the communist era. The television even broadcasts socialist propaganda typical of the period before life in Poland was turned upside down as communist rule across the nations of the Warsaw Pact came to an end. This timber-clad, upside-down house, the only one like it in Poland, took approximately 5 times longer than a conventional house to construct. One of the main factors contributing to the longer than normal construction phase was the disorientation experienced often by the tradesmen and the workers as they worked on the upside-down house. They just had to take a break and get outside. The same disorientation is reportedly experienced by present-day tourists in the upside-down structure. They report feelings of seasickness and giddiness just after a few minutes of being in this strange upside-down dwelling. It's that feeling of seasickness and lostness that I want you to kind of focus in on, try to imagine what that might feel like, and to ask you simply this question of, you ever felt that way about life in general, like maybe things were upside down? You ever felt like you were going against the flow? Like the world is an awkward place to live and you just can't really find a place to put your feet? Have you ever looked around and noticed that something's just not quite right? Something's out of place. Things are out of place. That the values and the priorities of the world are often the opposite of what they should be. Ever felt like you were walking around in an upside-down world? Well, be encouraged because you're in good company. Matthew 5 is the beginning of Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. It goes all the way through the end of chapter 7. But it begins with the very famous preamble, the front part, that we call the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed is the word. We call them the Beatitudes because of the word blessed. It comes from the Latin word beatus, which means blessed. But really a better way to translate and to think about these is to look at the original Greek, where the word's not so much blessed. It's not beatus in Latin. In Greek, it's markios, which means happy. Happy. Happy are those who do and exemplify these things. This is nothing new. Many teachers and preachers over the years have pointed this out, that it means happy. In fact, there was a famous television preacher a generation ago that was a pastor of a big church, and he had a nice book that came out, and the title of the book was The Be Happy Attitudes. Maybe some of you read that. And really that captures the meaning of blessed here. Blessed in the sense of an actual experience in life of happiness. Now, that's important. That's important. That understanding is important because it has a huge impact on not only how we interpret the Beatitudes, but really how we interpret the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. Is this Sermon on the Mount a list of things that we must do in order to win God's favor, God's approval? Kind of an update to the 10 Commandments? Certainly has all the appearances. We have Jesus here going up on a mountain at the beginning of his ministry, just like Moses, who went up on Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments. Jesus taking his disciples up on a mountain to teach them. Is this simply a new form of giving the law in the Gospels? That interpretation certainly has a lot of merit, and scholars have always pointed to that. There's even some intentionality there on the part of Jesus to do this. But that interpretation does not go far enough or deep enough. Because as we know from the rest of the Gospels and the New Testament, Jesus did not come to simply reiterate or repeat the law. He didn't come to do away with the law either. Jesus said, I have come to fulfill, to fill up, to provide what's lacking, to fulfill the law. And a big part of fulfilling the law was to show it as a living reality, to show what it looked like, to say to his followers, this is what the God who made you wants for you. This is how life is supposed to be lived. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is your path to a truly happy and blessed life. In fact, you could really take that principle and go back and reinterpret the Ten Commandments correctly. God gave those 10 commandments originally, not to say, well, if you do these 10 things, you'll get into heaven, but more to say, if you want life to be lived to its fullest, if you really want to be happy here on earth, this is how you live it. And that's important. So to say that we are blessed or to say that we are happy if we do these things isn't so much like you better do these things, but you want to do these things. This is where I want you to live. This is what you were made for. It also implies that we have some real choices when it comes to these things. Now, we have real choices, but the problem is we live in a world that often gives us a distorted view of what's real and what's important. And sometimes that makes the choosing difficult. Sometimes we make the wrong choices, don't we? In the mid-1800s, philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote a little parable about two robbers who broke into a jewelry store one night, and they did a very strange thing. They didn't take anything with them. They just simply switched all the price tags around. They took the high price tags off the expensive jewelry and put them on the costume jewelry. And then they took the bargain price tags off of the cheap stuff and they put it on the really expensive stuff. Now, the next day, the jewelry store opened, business as usual. In fact, over the next several weeks, no one noticed that folks were buying rings and necklaces and walking out of the store with things that were worth thousands of dollars and paying as little as $20 for them. And in the same way, others were buying cheap costume jewelry for thousands of dollars and thinking they were getting something really nice. Kierkegaard thought that this parable described well his own day, his own country, and the world in which he lived. He said this, "My point is obvious, isn't it? The people of my day have no ability to tell the truly valuable from the virtually worthless, not just in commerce, but in the world of ideas too. Our age is putting on a veritable clearance sale. Everything can be had so dirt cheap that one begins to wonder whether in the end anyone will want to make a bid." And I wonder, how did Kierkegaard have access to the internet so long ago? Well, that's really what Jesus is doing in this parable, in these Beatitudes. He's putting the price tags back where they belong. That's what he's doing. They're upside down because they're opposite to what the world would say. Now, allow me to reconstruct here a comparison. And I want you to listen in this for your own personal takeaway. I'm going to read the world's view, and then I'm going to give the beatitude that counters that. And, you know, preachers are supposed to give their congregants a takeaway. So I want to challenge you to listen for your one or two takeaways in here where it may speak to where you're living and where your attitude in your life is right now. So just listen. Here's what the world says. The world says, "Great are those who assert themselves, for they shall get what they want." Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." The world tells us, "Great are those who laugh and can make people laugh, for they shall be popular." But Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." The world says, "Great are the aggressive, for they shall bury their opponents." But Jesus says, "Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth." The world says, "Great are those who don't need God, for they shall have self-satisfaction." But Jesus says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." The world tells us, "Great are those who get even, for they shall be feared and respected." But Jesus tells us, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. The world tells us, great are those who don't get caught, for they shall look good. But Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The world tells us, great are those who argue forcefully, for they shall have the last word. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. The world tells us, great are those who avoid making their convictions clear, for they will always have either side of the fence. Jesus says, blessed are those who've been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This self-centered, me-first message that the world often gives us is so constant that sometimes, and it's so subtle that we don't even notice it, but we're bombarded by it every day, and sometimes we give into it in one form or another. But I ask you this, as you think about the contrast there, have you ever known anyone who chose that me-first, self-centered way, who was truly happy and blessed? It doesn't work. That's what Jesus is saying. It doesn't work. It might seem like it's right side up, but folks, it's upside down. If there is one overriding message that goes along with all the other messages of the Sermon on the Mount, all the way through chapter 7 in Matthew, it's simply this. The life that God intended for you and me to live is different from the prevailing ideas of life in our world today. Jesus comes into our world and He changes all the price tags. He changes all the values. He comes in and at times it feels like He stands us on our head, but what He's really doing is putting us on our feet and standing us up in an upside down world. And Jesus is challenging us to live right side up in this upside down world. Now, He's not challenging us to do this so that we can prove that we love Him. He's not challenging us because He wants to see us suffer. He's challenging us because He wants us to be happy, truly happy. And He knows that this is the only way that you and I are going to be truly happy, to live it according to the values of His kingdom. So I ask you, as I asked myself this morning, are we committed to living right side up in an upside down world, no matter what the cost? What might that mean for us today? What would that look like in our lives if we lived by the values of Jesus Christ instead of the prevailing values of the world around us? And what would that mean for us in our witness, shining our light as the church of Jesus Christ? You know, every now and then, even this upside-down world recognizes the value and the beauty of right-side-up living, and that's very encouraging. Even the world can celebrate the friend who chooses to forgive and let the past be gone. Even the world recognizes and celebrates the soldier or law enforcement officer who lays down his or her life in the line of duty to save the life of another, to save the life of a friend. Even the world celebrates the parents who patiently provide for a special needs child. Even the world celebrates and recognizes the wife who lovingly cares for her husband with dementia. Even the world recognizes and values at times the young person who, in the face of great temptation, does what is right, not because he or she is afraid of getting caught, but because they know it's the right thing to do. And that kind of selfless commitment is right side up in an upside down world. But the world is so hungry to see it and to believe that it's really possible. And that's where you and I come into it. As the vessels, as the emissaries, as the ambassadors of right side up living, to give the world hope to see not that we're all that great, but that God's light is shining in us and that, yes, it is possible to live right side up in this upside down world. Is that happening in your life right now? Are you going with the flow or are you going against the grain? Now, when I say going against the grain, I'm not saying be ornery or disagreeable. the Lord knows we got enough of that around going on today. But it simply means this: the humble willingness to be different, to stand with Jesus, even if that means that we're standing alone. But I can guarantee you, you will not be standing alone. No, we will never stand alone. He'll always be with us, and there will always be others who are ready to stand with you, who are also His disciples, who are also committed to upside living in an upside-down world. I like Kierkegaard's image of the thieves in the jewelry store. If you think about it, it's really quite biblical. Wasn't it Jesus who came as a thief to rearrange the price tags? That's what He's doing here in the Sermon on the Mount. And He's also the thief who continues to come in your life and mine by the Holy Spirit, seeking to steal away our hearts from this world and from the devil. And He's also the one that the Bible promises that will come back at the end of time, like a thief in the night. But this time not to just rearrange the price tags, but coming instead as the rightful owner of the store, ready to take the keys and to finally and ultimately turn this upside-down world right side up. The gospel of Jesus rearranges all our price tags, and blessed are those who are not offended by this rearrangement. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.